Out of nowhere, Gord gets shot in the head. The blood splatters all over Lincoln's face, and Lincoln says, "Scatter, now!" Episode 3, The Outlaw. We see Lincoln and the others all scatter. We then see Lucy get shot in the head, Tom gets hit in the shoulder, and everyone scatters. Lindsay rides up and says, "Spread out! You find them, you kill. Don't capture." As we see groups of Vipers spread out into teams to go off and kill Lincoln's people. Lincoln is running through the woods. We see he got separated from everybody else, and he can hear the Vipers are following him from behind. He backs up against a tree, and we see him try to stay quiet as we see the Vipers pass him in the distance. Out of nowhere, a Viper comes up behind him. The Viper takes a swipe at Lincoln, and Lincoln ducks. He pulls out his pocket knife and sticks it in the Viper's arm. Lincoln pulls out his gun and points it to the Viper's head and says, "You want to try something else? Huh? Go right ahead. But I'll warn you, it won't end well for you. And I'd really like to keep the few bullets I've got left in my gun, thank you very much." And the Viper laughs and says, "Your people are dead anyway. What difference does it make? The clock's ticking for you, Mr. West." Lincoln clicks his gun and laughs and says, "Well, that's the difference between you and me. Your time's already up." And he kills the man and walks off to go find his people. We see the sun is starting to rise. We see Lindsay, Cade, and about 10 other Vipers are on the roads hunting Lincoln's group, and they're on their horses, and Lindsay says to Cade, "They got away. They stop," and Cade says, "Yeah, they couldn't have gotten far." Lindsay says, "Well, these people must be found. I'm starting to think that Miles' little field trip was a waste of resources and time." Cade asks, "You think he's alive?" Lindsay says, "I don't know. These people are still alive. And not even a word from Miles. I'm starting to wonder if this whole thing was a trap." Cade asks, "You think Miles is up to more than just trying to kill these outlaws?" Lindsay says, "Wouldn't surprise me. When we let him in, he didn't exactly seem trustworthy then, but I didn't follow my gut. He proved himself. When Steven found him, he was half dead. But he proved to me that he was committed, and I let him in. I'm starting to think I should have went with my gut. Maybe I should have." Cade says, "We don't know yet. He could very well be back." Lindsay says, "Oh, I hope he is. He's gonna need to explain why the people he promised to kill are peacefully riding the roads in the middle of the night without a single care in the world." And Cade says, "I can take some of us north. Check to see what's going on. End the mystery." Lindsay says, "Yeah, good idea. We'll get everything back to normal around here." Cade says, "All right. Andrew, Joel, Pete, you guys stay with the Queen. You protect her at all times. You make sure she gets back to the city safe. You got me?" Andrew says, "Of course, Sergeant. We won't let you down." Cade says, "All right. The rest of you with me. Let's go." As they ride off to go find Miles, and it's now only Lindsay and 3 other Vipers as they start heading for home. But as they start riding away with just Lindsay and 3 other Vipers, we see someone following them in the woods from far. Kezia steps out of the woods looking very rough and angry. As Lindsay's group splits off from Kate and the rest, Kezia pulls out her bow and arrow and starts to follow Lindsay's group from far. Back at the church. We hear the church bells ringing. Miles is standing outside, and we see the Vipers are standing outside of the church all together with their weapons out. And then the bells stop. Steven clicks his gun and says, "We doing this?" Miles says, "And waste the resources? Nah, we're gonna bring our little friends out here to us." He pulls out his sword and says, "This is over! I'm through with your games. We have a lot of people out here with a lot of guns. And believe me, we know you have a lot of ammunition yourselves. We all saw that. More than I care to know, I'm afraid. So open the doors, or we'll have to open them for you." And then we hear one of the babies crying, and we see Haley standing at the door with her gun out, and Blake says, "Haley, it's over. They're right there." And Haley says, I know. Just give me a second to think." Haley is looking at all the scared families and says, "They're gonna kill us. It's over." Haley looks out the window and says, "I see about 10 of them tops. How many bullets do you have left?" Blake says, "I used everything back at the ranch. I've got nothing left." Haley says, "I've only got 6 bullets. And Blake looks nervous, and Haley has a few tears running down her face and says, "Well, then that's what we've got." And one of the little girls says to their mothers, "I don't want to die, Mom." And Blake says, "We gotta try. Whether we somehow kill them all or we die out there, we gotta try. You said you wanted to do things Lincoln's way, right?" And Haley nods her head and says, "Yeah." And Blake says, "Then we're opening that door." And Haley looks really nervous and says, "All right. Blake, get the families into that room and lock the door. And get ready." We see Steven say to Miles, "Hey, we're all ready. Just give us the signal." And Miles and his men have their swords out, and we see Haley is aiming her gun towards the door, slightly shaking, and we see Blake next to her with a knife out. The door handles are turning. The Vipers enter. Haley shoots the first 3 and kills them. One swings at Blake and he ducks, and Haley shoots the Viper. Haley fires another shot but misses, and then the Viper tackles Blake to the ground and pulls out its knife. Haley falls to the ground and tries to shoot the next Viper, but her gun is now empty. The Viper knocks the gun out of her hands, and the 3 Vipers have Haley and Blake pinned to the floor, and Haley is starting to panic as they're about to kill her. We see her in slow motion trying to fight back. We hear the Viper pull out his knife slowly and is about to kill them both. Haley hears the baby screaming from the other room, scared for their lives, as she imagines her kids, Ryan and Macy, getting murdered by Chris. The screams that she's hearing from outside of the door from the little kids turns into, in her imagination, Chris cutting off Ryan's arm as he screams, and Macy is crying as she watches Chris do this to her brother. Haley then snaps out of it, and the Viper pulls out his knife, and it's now her turn to die. And we see her slightly reach her head up, and she accepts that this is the fate for herself. Miles and the rest of the men are about to enter the church, and then all of a sudden, one of Miles's men gets shot in the head right next to him, and the guy with the knife about to kill Haley and Blake turns around to see a bunch of military men come in and start killing all of Miles's men. Miles and Steven run as the rest of the Vipers all get shot up and killed by these men. Haley kicks the guy with the knife in the leg, and he falls to the ground. The other two Vipers that were holding them down try to make a run for their lives, but they get killed trying to get away. As we see these soldiers come in and kill every last Viper they can. But we see Miles and Steven break off and run away into the woods, barely with their lives. Soldier 1 says, "Spread out! You three, find our stragglers and put a bullet in each of their poor lives." And the soldiers say, "You got it." Soldier 1 walks up to Haley and Blake and helps them up and says, "Hi, sorry for the disturbance. And what I'm about to say is about to sound completely impossible. And this might sound way too good to be true to most people nowadays, but we're here to help you." Back with Lindsay. We see her riding with 3 other Vipers after splitting up from Cade's group, and the Viper says, "Heads up!" And they all stop, and we see a few deadheads that have just been killed just laying on the road. Lindsay gets off her horse and walks over to them. Lindsay is taking a look at these deadheads on the road, and one of her Vipers on his horse says, "What is it, my queen?" Lindsay looks a bit nervous and looks at the blood still pouring out of the deadhead's neck and says, "The blood is running. This just happened." And the Viper says, "That means someone's just been here." And Lindsay gets back on her horse and says, "We should get back." Out of nowhere, 2 of her Vipers get arrows to their heads and go down. Lindsay panics, and then next to her, a knife is thrown and goes into the other Viper's head, and he falls off his horse. Lindsay tries to escape, but as she tries to get out, another arrow nails her in the shoulder, and Lindsay falls off of her horse. Lindsay very quickly takes out the arrow out of her shoulder with no hesitation, and we see her starting to bleed out. But then Kezia comes rushing out of the woods with only 1 arrow left. She fires the arrow and Lindsay ducks just in enough time as Lindsay is still bleeding out. She then takes out her knife and Kezia runs to her and takes a swipe at Lindsay. Lindsay ducks and slashes Kezia in the face twice over. Kezia falls to the ground, and as Lindsay is still bleeding, she looks down at a huge hill behind her, and Kezia's face is bleeding. Lindsay takes out her knife and is walking up to Kezia and is about to finish her off. Kezia takes out her pocket knife and drives it into Lindsay's leg. As Lindsay screams, Kezia gets back up, and Kezia pushes Lindsay down a huge hill. Kezia watches her fall as she stands there with a cut-up face and says, "Yeah, real nice to meet you too, bitch." and she then walks down the hill to try to find and kill Lindsay. Back with Tom. We see he and Sydney got out together, and she is taking a look at his gunshot wound in his shoulder. Sydney says, "Well, they got you pretty good, but you should be alright." Tom gets up and says, "Well, alright, let's keep moving." Tom walks ahead, and Sydney pulls out her walkie and says, "Lincoln, Kezia, you hear me? Do you guys copy?" Damn it. She catches up to Tom, and they're walking through the woods trying to find anyone else, and Tom is holding his shoulder, and he says, "Kind of like old times, huh?" Sydney nods, and Tom says, "This feels like when me and you and Lincoln first met. Walking through the woods, barely surviving, being hunted by crazy bastards that want our heads." Sydney says, "Yeah, I knew this was coming. If there's one thing the past few months have taught me is that we can't hide from our fears. We just gotta face them head on." We then see a few deadheads up ahead, and Sydney kills them for Tom. Tom thanks her and says, "Yeah, we can't let these people destroy the kind of life that we're trying to make for ourselves." Sydney says, "These people aren't going to change that." Tom says, "Well, I say the first move against these people is what me and Lincoln did back at the factory. We find where these people are holding up, and from then on, that's when this starts to change. We'll have the advantage. We'll know where they are." Sydney looks like she agrees and says, "You're right. Things are different. For one, it's fucking freezing out here." Tom says, "Huh, you're telling me." Sydney says, "And we don't have to just worry about ourselves. We have a whole damn crew and families to protect. Plus, you've gained a few pounds." Tom laughs a bit and says, "Well, since the world went to shit, I realized one very important thing. The importance of food, my dear. I see the food, I eat and repeat. I eat and repeat." And Sydney says, "That may be the dumbest thing you've ever said, but tell me about it." And they both laugh, and then they step out of the woods to find an old building. They see the building, and Tom says, "Well, if you were Lincoln, where would you go?" Sydney says, "I don't know where I'd go, but I do know that they can be anywhere. And she starts to kind of break down. "For any reason the others didn't make it, we're going to find out. So let's go." And as they walk into the building, we see from a little ways behind them, Cade and the other 6 Vipers left. See them entering the building, and Cade takes out a sword and is ready to go in and kill them both. Back with Kezia. She is searching for Lindsay, trying to finish her off, but she can't find her anywhere. She then walks down the hill, and she sees blood in the snow. She sees footprints and a blood trail, but we see after a while the trail's gone cold. And Kezia looks upset, and we see her face is still covered in blood, and she lets out a big scream. And she then starts to cry, and she looks defeated. But then we hear her walkie-talkie going off. It's Lincoln. He says, "This is Lincoln. Does anyone copy? Please respond if you hear my voice." And Kezia's cry then slowly fades into a smile. As she hears Lincoln's voice again over the walkie, she picks it up and says, "Yes, I'm here, Lincoln." And Lincoln says, "Kezia? Oh, thank God. Tell me where you are. I'll come find you." As we see, Kezia has a smile on her face, and it looks like she has now been found. Back with Haley's group and the military. We see Blake and the rest of the families are all riding separate trucks. As we see, Haley is in the passenger seat of one of the other army trucks. Soldier 1 named Roger is driving, and Haley asks, "So when are you going to tell me why you saved us all back there?" Roger says, "Well, a few reasons." Haley, she says. Roger says, "Well, a couple reasons, Haley. For one, we're not just going to stand by the sidelines while scared children and families are about to get murdered for that. And for two, our leader has a bone to pick with these Vipers, and our job is to make sure that none of these people are anywhere near our town." Haley asks, "You have a town?" Roger says, "Yes, ma'am. We do. Since the world fell apart, we've all been working together to turn this place into what it is." Haley looks a bit suspicious and says, "So you're telling me that you just saved everyone out of the goodness of your own heart? Is that what you're trying to tell me?" Roger says, "Hey, look, I know you don't believe us, and frankly, why should you? I've given you no reason to trust us. But it's a shame." And Haley says, "What is?" Roger says, "Because I miss the days where you could meet new people and it'd be like a fun new adventure. And now it's just full of lies and no one can even trust each other anymore." Haley says, "Well, I sure hope you're as legit as you're selling yourself. Truth is, I'm out here with all these families because we lost our home last night." Roger asks, "The Vipers?" Haley says, "Yeah, I'm trying to be a good leader for these people because all I have left is them." Roger asks, "How far was your home?" Haley asks, "Does it matter?" Roger says, "Yes, ma'am, it does. Look, we have to make sure that we got rid of every last one of these Vipers. We don't need any more strays following us back home." Haley says, "Well, it's about a 15-minute walk south of the church." And Roger says, "Thanks for the cooperation, ma'am. We'll send a team out today. Make sure we didn't miss anything on our way by." And we see some awkward silence for a sec, and Roger says, "So, any of those children yours?" We see that she's not mentioning Lincoln because she doesn't look like she's sure yet. Haley says, "Oh, you really don't want to hear my story, man. Trust me." Roger says, "Hey, look, since we've built this community, I've heard the worst stories you could ever hear in the world from people, and we still brought them in. So don't feel scared to share anything." And Haley says, "Well, me and my people had a place, but the Vipers destroyed it. We all tried to run out of there, but our people were attacked. And my two children got their heads cut off, and they put them on trees for my husband to see. And then afterwards, they took me hostage, and they raped me. But after a while, we fought back, and we won. We did. We thought we killed every last one of them. What we thought was all of them. And then we moved out. Stayed at this ranch for a while, found out that there was more of them out there. And last night, our ranch was destroyed, and we were all almost killed. And we all almost got killed in that church until, well, you know the rest." And Roger looks speechless and says, "Well, damn. I don't know what to say." Haley says, "Yeah. And my husband, he died in the fire." And Roger says, "Well, by all means, you people need a home, and mark my damn words when I say you're gonna get one." Haley thanks him and then says, "So, is that one of the worst stories you've heard yet?" Roger says, "Oh, without a question. But the world keeps going, right?" Haley says, "What do you mean?" Roger says, "Look, what I like to do, and this is what I always like to do to remind me that we are so lucky to be alive right now, because we are. The world before is what it was, and now it's a new generation." Haley says, "What the hell are you talking about?" Roger says, "No, I'm serious. Just level with me here for a second. We don't have any bills, no jobs, no responsibilities. When you get food, you don't have to pay for anything. We don't have those stupid iPhones, and literally back in the day, no one would ever just talk to someone face to face. Everyone would just always be worried about what the likes they got on their Instagram post or all the snaps they're getting, and nobody would just get their faces out of their phones and just talk to people. I miss that. And most importantly, and this is just a bonus, I get to go home tonight and sleep in my bed knowing that I don't have to pay for a goddamn thing. And Haley laughs and says, well, you make it very hard to argue with you. Roger says, because it's the truth. Everyone that does something, no matter how bad they may seem on the outside, there's always a reason for why people do what they do, including these vipers. And Haley says, no, these vipers aren't justified for the shit they do. Roger says, maybe not to you, or us, but everyone has a story. Everyone has a reason for why they do what they do. Now, the reason might not always be the biggest, but there's always a reason why people do what they do. Just like there's a reason why the vipers are the people they are, and why we are the way we are too. Haley doesn't say anything, but she looks like she understands what he's saying, and Roger says, the world never died. It just gave us a chance to all come together and fix what we didn't know was broken, but was. Back with Tom and Sydney. They enter the building. It's very quiet, and there's a lot of dead corpses all around as they keep moving. Tom says, all right, I'll go upstairs. You go down this hall and down those stairs there. Sydney says, got it. We see Tom go up the stairs, and he checks all the rooms, but it doesn't seem to be anything up there. We then see Sydney downstairs checking the rooms. She slowly keeps walking down the hallway. Out of nowhere, a deadhead jumps her. She's on the ground, and Tom hears this and yells, Sydney! And Sydney picks up a piece of broken glass from the destroyed picture frame on the floor and stabs it in the head, and Tom is yelling, Sydney! And Sydney says, I'm okay, I'm okay. She looks a bit freaked out, and Tom says, the top floor's clear. Come on up. But then, we hear the front door open. Tom hears that and knows it can't be Sydney because she's downstairs. Sydney tries to stay quiet as we see Cade and 6 other vipers with swords enter the building. Cade says, well, you know we're here. And you know we can't let you leave. Sydney hears this and is trying to lock herself in. Tom is trying to slowly get downstairs to kill them, but he's trying to be really quiet. Sydney is trying to lock herself into the room. Tom is walking through the halls ever slowly and trying to be quiet. A deadhead comes up behind him and he kills it with his knife. Cade then hears this and says, upstairs, go. Tom has no bullets left, and he hides behind a door as Cade and the vipers come up the stairs. Tom then busts through a door and puts his axe through a viper's head. Cade sees this from down the hall and says, the rest of you find the girl, leave him to me! Cade then runs up to Tom and swings at him. Tom blocks it with his axe and headbutts Cade to the ground, but quickly gets back up and swings it once again, and then he cuts Tom's axe into 2. Cade then kicks Tom into a door and into another room. Tom punches Cade, and Cade drops his sword on the ground. Tom picks him up, and with no hesitation, throws him out of a window, and Cade falls out of the building. Meanwhile, downstairs, Sydney breaks a window and climbs out of the building. She hears screaming from upstairs, and she steps outside to see someone in a car flashing their headlights towards Sydney. And she looks scared at first, but then she starts to smile, but we don't know who it is yet. We see Tom inside, killing the rest of the Vipers through the hallway. Two tackle him then to the ground and are about to kill Tom, but then... Lincoln shoots the last Vipers and gives him his hand and says, "You alright, brother?" Tom smiles a little bit and hugs him as they walk out of the building together. Tom walks out with Lincoln, and we see that Lincoln found Kezia, Luke, as well as Sydney, who has just found them. Tom hugs Kezia and Luke and asks Lincoln, "How'd you find them?" Lincoln says, "Ran into Luke in the woods. We walked for a while, then we heard Kezia over the radio, and we came to get her." "Crazy day, huh?" Tom says, "Yeah, it sure was. If I would have known better, I would have brought some of that Jack Daniels I found on that run a couple of weeks ago. Let the liquor do the thinking." And Lincoln says, "Well, we lost the food, lost friends. I don't know about you, but I'd say this trip ends about here." Kezia says, "I agree. Let's go home." Back with Miles and Steven. Steven walks up to Miles and says, "It's been hours. I think we finally lost those soldiers." Miles looks pissed and says, "I had one job. One job. And I failed." Steven says, "Hey, look, point is you tried, okay?" Miles says, "No, you're not hearing me, okay? I'm dead. You understand that? I'm dead." Steven says, "No, you're not. Look, we can talk to her. Tell her what happened. She'll listen." Miles says, "No, she won't. She told me that the next time I'd failed her like this, she'd kill me. And that was for being trapped in a snowstorm. So if I got threatened for that, what the fuck is she gonna do to me now?" Miles looks upset and says, "Go. Tell her I died. Tell her that we got ambushed and that you're the only one that made it out alive. You can tell her. She'd believe you." Steven says, "Brother, don't put me in this position." Miles says, "Well then come with me." Steven says, "Is that why you've been checking out that truck earlier? Just leave?" Miles says, "Steve, that thing has 3/4 worth of gas. With all that, we can get the hell out of here and for good." Steven says, "And go where?" Miles says, "I've been looking for a chance to find my old friend again. That Dave guy I told you about." Steven says, "How do you know he's even still out there?" Miles says, "I don't. But I'm gonna find out." Miles gets into the truck and Steven says, "You don't want to do this. I know you don't." Miles says, "You can still come. My offer stands." And Steven looks at Miles right in the face and tells him, "But she's still my queen." And he starts to walk away with an empty look on his face. And Miles starts to cry, and he starts up the truck, and with a lot of hesitation, he drives away. Back with Lindsay. We see she's passed out, and she's very dehydrated. We see someone has found her. As we reveal, it's Cade. He takes her and carries her till they get back to his horse that he has before he fought Tom. And he puts her on the horse and they ride off to go back home. After a bit, Cade asks, "You gonna tell me what happened?" Lindsay says, "I was attacked." And she looks very out of it, and they then see more Vipers run into them on the road. We see one of the sergeants named Delta says, "Oh my God, what the hell happened?" Cade says, "Please, Delta, not now." Lindsay is starting to pass out and Cade says, "She was attacked." Delta says, "And you didn't protect her?" Cade says, "Just lead the way home, okay?" And they all ride back to Washington together. Back with Lincoln and the others. Tom says, "Sucks I lost my ex." Sydney says, "Yeah, well, by those little baby screams up in that house, I thought you lost your ass there for a second." Tom says, "Shut up. Although he sure kicked my ass, though, let me tell you." Lincoln asks, "Is he dead?" Tom says, "I don't know." Kezia says, "Well, look on the bright side. At least we're all back together." They then hear something from up the hill. They all pull over and they get out of the car. And they can see this from far. There is a train driving down the tracks. We see it drive by, and they all watch it drive down the tracks, and they all start standing on the tracks as Tom says, "Excuse me, but what in the holy fuck did I just see?" Lincoln and the rest all look nervous, and Sydney says in the background, "Must be vipers. And if it's not, then we better get the hell out of here." Kezia says, "Yeah, let's go." And as they start walking away, over 50 military soldiers surround them from every direction and say, "Drop your weapons! Hands up!" Lincoln looks freaked out and says, "Go on, put your guns down." Meanwhile with Lindsay. It's been a few hours, and we see her making all of her people gather around just outside of the city. And we see her get up at the top, and she says, "I have returned." And everyone starts cheering for her, and she says to her people, as we see her make up a fake story, "It's time I told you the truth about what happened here today. Me and my sergeants went out to go help people. People that needed our help, that we always like to give at any chance we get. But when we got there, these people called the Outlaws came in and took every last one of them out. There was nothing we could do. But they had weapons and food and things that we can use to make sure that those supplies will be there to help someone. Frankly, I'm just sorry they didn't live long enough to see what we had for them. But we can certainly honor them." These outlaws almost killed me today. They killed a lot of our people today. They killed people that gave their lives for this place, but it's not enough. And right now, I want to show you what these outlaws do to people. And we see a sergeant gives her a bag with something in it. And she says, "This right here is one of the poor victims." And she pulls out the bag and she holds it up, and we see it's Austin's head. She holds it up in front of everyone and says, "This is the Outlaws. This is who they are." As Lindsay's narrating, we see Lincoln and his people surrounded and dropping their weapons. Lindsay says, "This is who they are. This is what they do to you." But all of that is about to change. We hear the crowd cheering, and we see the look of fear on Lincoln and everyone else's faces with their hands up. And Lindsay drops Austin's head on the ground, and she says, "Because we're going to war." Lincoln and the others look scared, and as they lay down their weapons, we hear a soldier says, "Boss, come take a look at this." We see the leader walk up to Lincoln. It's Dave. He walks up to Lincoln and says, "Well, well, well, Mr. West. Apologies for my brutal honesty, but you look like shit."